The next session that I'm really pleased to start here is a conversation with Emily Grace Buck about accommodating differences around mental illness and neurodiversity in the workplace. And the opportunity we have to talk to Emily is particularly wonderful because she is both a manager and an experienced member of the game community, as well as somebody with a neurodiversity diagnosis. And so we're really pleased to be able to have her join us for this conversation about how we do this practically in the workplace, and what the challenges and opportunities and all are. And I'm just, before we jump into this, Emily, why don't you jump out and jump back in again? Let's see if we can fix this. So just jump out of the Zoom entirely, and then we'll see if we can jump you back in and fix it.
All right. I'll be right back, everyone. Thank you.
And I hope everyone had a great break. I'm still finishing up my dark chocolate, which is now I have two of Emily, and neither of whose camera I can turn back on. Well, we're having all kinds of challenges here. With Emily coming in and leaving. Thank you all for your patience while we figure this out. Oh, great. I have messed things up. I need to add Emily on the back end. One moment. We're on our way to fixing this, but in the meantime, please chat among yourselves. Thank you all for being here and being patient. You're getting a back end view to the experience of running a small nonprofit on a shoestring budget. So we did make a few changes to the back end on the advice of Zoom support earlier today with the hope. But if you left the chat, the Zoom meeting to take a break and then signed back in, you won't see earlier chat. That doesn't save. That's why we are in Slack for saved stuff. And Tammy, we'll get you, make sure you have access to the Slack in just a moment. So the point of the conversation that I'm hoping to have with Emily is about wanting to ensure that she has that people know in a non-stigmatized way what it means to interact with folks who have and support and manage folks who have a mental health challenge. And one of the things that inspired me to want to do this session and to reach out to Emily was my own experience of working with a number of people who have a variety of mental health challenges and wanting to provide them with opportunities to have meaningful careers and experiences in the game industry or in any sort of industry, and knowing that there are, especially as we talked about this morning in the sessions, that these mental health diagnoses, these neurodiversity diagnoses, can have a real impact on your ability to function in the workplace sometimes, but they also have a real, they're just a part of who we are as people. And so we bring a lot to the table, and many folks find that many folks desire really pretty strongly to have access to careers and to opportunities. And we want to be able to take advantage of the wisdom and experience that all of these folks have in the workplace. And so how do we frame, what are some of the ways in which we can reframe working with people who may not have access to the same or be able to work in the same schedules or in the same ways, or who need support in ways that the modern workplace is just not designed to. So it looks like Emily is able to talk to us even though she can't.
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, and that's
Hi,
wonderful.
everyone.
So, Emily, I thank you for all of this back and forth. I don't know quite what's going on, but I want to thank you for joining us today. And I'd like you to introduce yourself and why you wanted to have this conversation particularly today, and what you bring to the table in terms of experience and context.
Absolutely. So, hi, everyone. My name is Emily Grace Buck. I am a narrative designer and narrative director. I currently work at Ubisoft Reflections in Newcastle in the UK. So it's evening here right now. You're missing me sitting in my mother-in-law's kitchen with some very silly antique plates behind me and a nice cup of tea for the night. I have been working in games for quite a while now in various design and narrative capacities. And now I manage a team of writers and narrative designers. I also am autistic, and I have dealt with various other mental health issues throughout my life. I have depression. I'm, currently on medication for depression. I've had anxiety. And being able to create a workplace where people can thrive and really succeed is extremely important to me. Oh, I should be able to turn on my camera now. Let's see if it works. All right, I'm here. Hi, everyone. Magic. All right, so these are the wacky antique plates I was talking about. I hope you enjoy them throughout the program. But yeah, so as a game developer who is autistic and struggled a lot, especially when I was a junior and working through my mid-level, now that I'm working as a lead and as a manager, it means an awful lot to me to be able to try and help others have an easier time of it than I did. Now, part of why I had a lot of difficulty was I wasn't diagnosed as autistic until I was in my 30s, which is all too common, unfortunately, especially for women who are on the spectrum. But obviously, this happens to men and people of other genders quite a lot of the time, too. But the diagnostic criteria for getting diagnosed with autism as a child tends to be very specific to how autism presents in many young males. So a lot of girls fly under the radar and don't end up knowing what's going on with them until they're much older. So, I was going through all of my 20s with some, quite frankly, abysmal executive dysfunction issues and just trying to survive in the workplace. Now, don't get me wrong, I was still very successful at what I was doing. I was able to work on quite a number of video games that did really, really well. I was a lead designer on both of the Batman the Telltale series games and led quite a bit of the content through that. I was in charge of the Catwoman romance, which was a lot of fun. I was regularly pitching in meetings with prime stakeholders and executives and things like that. So it wasn't that I was completely held back from being able to do my work. And that's usually the case for people who have mental illnesses and neurodiversities. They're incredibly capable and sometimes even more capable than other people on their team because they'll work even harder to try and make up for what they see as their own deficiencies. Now, the main two issues that I struggled with personally that I want to address because I've talked to quite a lot of other people in the industry who have dealt with similar things and also seen some from some of my direct reports over the past few years. The first one is when you're dealing with mental illness or when you're neurodiverse, especially if you're undiagnosed and not the proper therapy treatment support that you might need. Um, Maintaining a very solid personal life can be very, very difficult, and especially maintaining a good balance between your work life and your personal life. So, for example, for me, I had difficulty forming really healthy relationships in my personal life because I didn't have a very good grasp of what those kind of relationships were meant to look like because I was an undiagnosed autistic and didn't quite know what I was doing. So I had a marriage that didn't work out, and that kind of thing distracts you from your work, obviously, because you're dealing with a lot of things that are stressors. That obviously people who are not neurodiverse, not mentally ill, get divorced and go through big things in their personal life all the time. But the way you react to it can be very different. And the reason you get there can be very different if you're dealing with mental illness or if you're autistic or ADHD, etc. And then the other one was understanding my own limits. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes people who are neurodiverse or have mental illnesses, you'll see them work even harder in the workplace to try and get over what they see as their own deficiencies. This can make us sometimes absolute super employees, which is wonderful. We're more likely to be the ones who volunteer to work a really long week or to take on a very difficult project because we're kind of looking to prove ourselves. But at the same time, when you're doing things like sprint plan, we may assume that we should be able to function at that superhero level every single week.
Mm.
And that's just not possible. That's not possible for anyone. But in general, and I'm saying this partially because I know I have historically been not the best at it, I tend to want to estimate my own work ability as my best possible work ability. And some days that's just not possible. Um, because it's not, once again, it's not possible for anybody because life just happens. But I can't control sometimes if I start having a shutdown or a meltdown because I don't know, someone's drilling outside and there's just a loud noise that I can't handle. Or if a text message comes in from my personal life that I take far too seriously because I'm already in a slightly emotional state and I can't regulate the same way as other people. And then I, lose productivity. And then what you often see too from people with um, mental health issues or neurodiversities, they'll try to make it up. So then they're working at weird hours. And
Mm.
this can also be exacerbated by working from home too, which we all are right now. We tend to be some of the people who, check our work email before we get out of bed in the morning and are still answering work emails like in the bathtub or at 2 a.m. when we're trying to watch a show and wind down because we can't wind down. We feel like we have to make up that time, and we don't. So especially if you're a producer or a manager, talk to those people on your team and tell them to stop flipping working. Tell them to shut off. And if you are in a relationship with someone like this, one of the best things you can do is exactly what I was just saying. Tell them to stop it. Like I'm very lucky. My fiance will sometimes see me kind of spiraling off like that, and he will actually just grab my phone out of my hand and put it in the other room because he's like, "No, you know what you're doing." And it's making you really upset.
So basically, what I'm hearing here is that if we're going to do accommodation well, we need to like model good boundaries and enforce them.
Exactly.
Right. And that's not unique, but it's really even more important in certain cases. And we need to have a certain amount of mental health literacy. So we know what we're talking about when we talk to people, and we can, it is never appropriate for a manager to diagnose somebody, but to be able to understand and contextualize what they're seeing, and maybe provide someone who's not aware with some hooks to think about, oh, maybe I could get help for something, or talk to someone and find out what's going on, so that there is this back and forth of, this is something that other people experience too. It's a real thing.
For certain. For
Yeah.
certain. And in the game
Yeah.
industry, this can be even worse because, we have people who are incredible workaholics a lot of the time in this industry. We also have
Yeah.
production schedules that don't allow for breaks anyway. So, in a lot of ways, our predominant working model is set up to burn out neurodiverse and mentally ill people even faster than others in the industry. And that's really unfortunate. We're really susceptible to it. And in order for us to be protected, everyone should be protected, because no one should have to deal with that. Nobody should be working far too many hours a day or not have any divisions between their work life and their personal life. That's just good practices all around. So really, most of the recommendations I would make to accommodate people in the workplace like that would be good for everyone. Having accommodations like being able to work from home a few days a week, or being able to work in an office with a door that shuts. There are plenty of other people who that would be good for too, like anyone with kids, or people who like just tend to get tired in the afternoon. It's like there's so many things.
I think
That
that, yeah, I mean, Emily, what you bring up, I think, is that in particular, practices like good boundaries and mental health literacy are essential for people who have a diagnosis, right? But overall, doing things like enforcing good boundaries and talking to people, contextualizing their experience inside of larger trends and issues, and like paying attention to issues like burnout, which is a major problem in the game industry. Those are about treating people as human beings, and and being good managers. And that's super important. And the game industry has not been particularly good at learning new skills, and at implementing best practice in management and in leadership. And those things go a long way, right? They go a long way.
Yeah. I mean, so much of the time, people who end up being managers, I'll even include myself in this, I didn't have a whole lot of practical management training before I became a manager. I've had more now that I am one. But that's the case a lot of the time. Somebody who's the best at their specialty will end up becoming in charge of other people. And then you also get sometimes folks who have a bit of a chip on their shoulder because they were worked to the bone like that. And so then they want to do the same with their direct reports, and kind of use some of that tough love. So it just perpetuates the cycle and doesn't particularly help anybody.
Yeah, and you say that. I mean, it's really important. I think about what happens in medicine, for example, right? Like people get worked to the bone, and residency is like a rite of passage, and then right. It's not like games are the only place where this happens, but it does happen.
Not at all.
It's not like, and games is not the hospital. It's not a place where you are worried about continuity of care. We have solutions to this. And I recognize we don't have a lot of time, and I'm gonna just give ourselves a few extra minutes before we jump to the next session, which is also super important and compelling. But what I do want to, I want to be careful about saying, that this is like, it's all about good boundaries and self-care, right? That's a kind of simplistic way of approaching it. And so what are the things that are harder to talk about, that are more complicated to address in terms of mental illness and neurodiversity in the workplace that don't have quite such easy answers and do have impacts to, say, productivity and things like that?
So, I mean, one of the most obvious ones is that not everyone will have disclosed their mental illness or their diversity to HR or to a manager in
Yeah.
order for you to help them. And there are many reasons why people choose not to
Yeah.
that are extremely valid. And when you have someone on your team who is in a situation where they're struggling, but you don't know exactly why, and to be fair, they might not know why either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of the best things you can do is ask them what they need, um, which
Mm-hmm.
sounds so obvious, but it's not. It's not obvious a lot of the time. Ask them what they need and figure out how to accommodate for them. The most common solution I've seen to that has been a solution through production, through thinking about their workload, through thinking about what their accountability structure looks like, how
Mm-hmm.
often they have people checking in with them. Are they someone who needs constant check-ins or for you to back way the hell off?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that, and experimenting in order to make sure that they feel comfortable and confident and able to continue. So
Yeah.
that's a really, really big one. And then if you do have people on your team who have disclosed to you personally, to HR, to the whole team, to the world, what their deal is that they're working with, to inform yourself about what that means. If you're going to be a good manager for that person, you should do your own basic research about what they're dealing with or what their personal
Mm-hmm.
neurodiverse status is. But then also still talk to them. And I know Dr. B says this all the time, and he probably will at some point during this conference, if he hasn't already, that like if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So don't necessarily assume that the person you know is going to fit the stereotypical mold of whatever their neurodiversity or disorder or illness might
Mm-hmm.
be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if people need to take time off of work, uh, check in with them. um, Especially for folks who are autistic or ADHD, sometimes you kind of hit a wall where things start to spiral out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And if too many things start to fall, I like to think of it as the kind of plate spinning
Yes.
analogy, that once you drop one plate, all of the plates break. And then once the plates are broken and lying on the ground, putting them back together is a lot harder than just keeping them spinning in the first
Yeah.
place. So you'll often see extended absences blamed on things like headaches. Um, and obviously, there are many things, many reasons people do genuinely have headaches for days. And I'm not saying if someone tells you that, they're lying. And also, it can feel like a headache a lot of the
Right.
time. It's just a good flag to check in with someone and say, like, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? Are you okay? In the least patronizing way that you can possibly muster. Because if you are patronizing about it, you're probably going to push someone further away.
Yeah. Yeah, respect goes a long way, right?
Yeah,
And asking somebody if they need help is a form of respect, in fact, or what they need, asking somebody what they need as opposed to assuming,
hmm,
um, and being
yeah.
flexible, right?
Empathy is going to get you really far.
What?
No, I
Empathy?
said empathy is going to get you really far.
Yeah, it turns out we're going to be
Yeah.
talking about that in a couple of hours, in fact, that very topic, with Chris Metzen. So I feel like, there are like many angles to this conversation, and once again, the things that make you a better manager overall will make you a better manager to people with a diagnosis, in part because, Emily, it turns out that diagnoses, mental health diagnoses and neurodiversity diagnoses are really common,
Mm.
right? They're super common. And so if you don't know somebody with a diagnosis, that means someone's not telling you, right? So making it okay to just have a conversation about what you need goes a long way to providing space for people to feel comfortable inhabiting, like showing up and inhabiting.
Definitely. And all the time and on any team, the more you can foster honesty and comfort and being open with each other, the better communication that you're going to have. And especially on like video games, the better the end product, because
Yeah.
people aren't going to be scared to speak up and to put themselves into the game.
Yeah, big time.
So,
Big time.
yeah, I think the biggest theme here, and we both kind of keep repeating it, but to say it very succinctly, the kind of accommodations that you would think of making for people with mental illnesses or who are neurodiverse are going to benefit absolutely everyone on your team.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that very rapid note, because I don't want to get too far behind in our schedule, but I really want to thank Emily. I thank you for your grace under pressure, and thank you for calling in late at night from the UK. We really
Yeah,
appreciate
no worries.
you here. It's awesome.